Everybody always wonders why I wait. It's because the stream starts 10 seconds after we go live. So,
no worries.
And welcome to the Industry 4 Community Podcast, sponsored by Phoenix Contact this month. I am your host with the most, Walker D. Reynolds. My guest today is Zach Stank from Phoenix Contact, specifically, or spends most of his time on the PLCnext side of the business. If you don't know who Zach is, that means that you're probably not spending a lot of time on LinkedIn, first and foremost. But for those of you who don't know who Zach is, I'm going to go ahead and have Zach introduce himself real quick. Zach, welcome to the podcast. Who are you? What do you do? And what the fuck are you doing here?
Thanks, Walker. I appreciate it. If you haven't seen me, that's fine. You've avoided LinkedIn, which I think at the beginning was not good, but now might be good, depending on the way you look at it. Might have jumped the shark a bit there, but I work at Phoenix Contact. I've been here coming up on year 14, and I am a product marketing manager for our automation systems and safety group. So that includes not only controllers like the PLCnext, but also HMIs, IPCs, safety, IO. There's Profibus legacy connectivity stuff in there. There's a lot of stuff that I cover, but for a lot of times I've been known as the faces of Phoenix Contact and PLCnext for a bit, but that's just part of my job, I guess. So
awesome. So a lot of people have asked us, why are we doing this podcast? Here's why we're doing the podcast.
Yeah.
Those of you in the community should know that by now that this month, Trent Christopher from 4.0 Hero is doing a 3-day workshop on edge connectivity and unified namespace for the mastermind. So you can buy the workshop. If you're not in mastermind, you can do the workshop. Okay. But the vast majority of the people who do the workshop are mastermind students. We generally will end up with 300 to 400 students in a workshop. And then we'll have like 300 to 400 of them are from mastermind. And then there's going to be like a 60 to 100 who are not in mastermind. They've just bought the workshop and joined it for the specific topic. The workshop this month is a 3-day workshop that Trent Christopher, formerly from Omron, but he's with 4.0 Hero, he went out on his own, is going to do on edge connectivity and unified namespace. Where that came from was Brian Pryby from Mock Controls, Dustin Symes. I can never remember Dustin Symes' company, but Brian Pryby from Mock Controls. Somebody please put Dustin Symes' company in the chat because I always forget it. Dustin Symes and Trent Christopher worked together at the Prove It conference, and their Prove It session, JPI Solutions, thank you, Justin Symes' company, JPI Solutions, they worked together at their booth. They were a bronze sponsor. They should have been a higher level. They should have been on stage because their presentation was incredible. It was all around edge connectivity. If you remember, digital transformation is connect, collect, store, analyze, visualize, find, pattern, report, solve on a common digital infrastructure. That's what it is over and over and over again. There are other things to it, but you can distill it down into that. The very few people did connect, collect, store from devices. Everybody did connect, collect, store from the existing unified namespace in our virtual factory. One of the things that we learned from that show, from Prove It, was just how few people know how to do edge connectivity in this space. That's where I started my career, Zach. I don't know where I started writing PLC programs. That's where my, I was writing ladder logic. That actually, I was writing ladder in a DOS environment initially. That's where I cut my teeth. Then I moved to function block and structured text, which is the IEC 61131 stuff. Okay. But it's amazing the number of people in this industry who don't know the edge connectivity piece. Well, the reason we asked Trent Christopher to do it is because Trent's been doing edge as long as I have. He worked for a long time at Omron, specializing in edge, instrumentation and process control, right? But if you look at all the devices that he put on his panel, all the devices that they were using were what we refer to as Industry 4 ready devices. So enter PLCnext. Okay. We've been partnered with PLCnext for quite some time. The 2152, right? It's the AFC 2152 is, and the 1152 were the PLCnext introduced an Industry 4 ready controller years ago. And we had them on Mastermind, and I actually have their rig in the background as part of our demo environment. When we announced this workshop, Phoenix Contact, PLCnext guys, Irish Sharp and Zach reach out and they're like, hey, we want to support you guys. Listen, here's what we'll do. We will give away a PLC to the first 50 people who sign up for this workshop. So that is people who, the a la carte people who join the workshop, the first 50 people who join the workshop and they have a US mailing address, we will give them a free 2152. The 2152 is what's on the IoT demo board, right? It's their Industry 4 ready PLC. So that's how we got to this point. We were like, hey, well, why don't we have Zach come on here? Because there's a message I want to convey. There's a message Zach obviously wants to convey. We want to talk about what Trent's going to be doing in this workshop. I'm going to go over it here in a second. But I want to talk about what's going on in the industry and some risks, some awesome things, but also some risks that I'm seeing. All right. So that's the framework. That's why we're doing this. That's the reason we're doing this podcast. If you have any questions about edge connectivity, PLCnext, Phoenix Contact, please drop them in the chat. I'm going to go through the workshop real quick, just the announcement piece. So the workshop titled Edge Connectivity and UNS Workshop, sponsored by Phoenix Contact and PLCnext. By the way, this was a total after, like, we didn't go to Phoenix Contact with this. We didn't say, hey, would you guys sponsor? Yeah, they literally reached out and were like, hey, we want to support this. And I want to ask them, why they're doing that. But I'm just going to, Trent Christopher's got 21 years doing controls, been highly involved in the Industry 4 community the last 5-6 years. Trent and I have had a million conversations together. He is the obvious guy to put on this workshop. So we literally have like the guy who's doing it. By the way, next month, our workshop, we're getting ready to announce this. Here's a little plug. We're actually going to do a workshop in July, 2 days, and it's going to be Model Context Protocol, and it's going to be put on by Aaron Semley from Highbyte. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Same thing. We're going to do a 2-day workshop. This one's 3 days here that Trent's doing. So day one, you're going to connect, diagnose connectivity states. You're going to connect to real simulated devices via Modbus, OPC UFX, Sparkplug, etc. And you're going to extract real tags and land it on your laptop. Okay. Day two, you're going to collect legacy. So you're going to turn raw registers into structured ISA 95 ready tags. So that is non-contextualized event data points coming out of devices. You're going to structure them. You're going to publish the legacy data via MQTT, which, by the way, in a PLCnext, you just do that from the edge device. Like, you just structure the message inside the PLC. You don't have to go through what Trent's going to be doing on day two. Okay. And then you're going to view it in a UNS browser and validate scale readiness. And then number three, you're going to do modern, which is the kind of stuff you can do with a PLCnext. You're going to use Kubernetes and Ignition Edge to flatten a tech stack. You're going to build the structured payloads in the controller, and you're going to publish Sparkplug data from edge to broker in real time. You do not have to have a PLCnext PLC to do this workshop. Okay. It is a value add. It is a value added thing. But where this really fits is people ask me all the time, hey, Walker, minimum technical requirements, I got to change stuff on the edge. What am I changing it to? And the answer is, I'm changing it to Opto 22 Groove Epic. I'm changing it to PLCnext. I'm changing it to Omron N series. There's a whole series of devices that support Industry 4. But literally the very first that was even remotely affordable was the PLCnext. So you guys have a huge head start. So with that, Zach, why is it you guys reached out? What was the, I mean, it's a big deal to say, hey, we'll give away 50 PLCs.
Yeah, I appreciate you putting a little bit of emphasis on how big of a deal it is, because, when Ira and I were talking about it, we brought it up to some of the executive team, and they're like, well, how much is that? And it's like, you do the math and you're like, wow, that is a significant dollar lift.
Yeah.
But then, in all disclosure, I am a marketing guy, right? So like I pay for advertisement, I do a lot of stuff. It costs a lot to advertise, like print media. Like one run in print media is upwards of $10,000, to do it. And it's like, what is the benefit of that? And you have to make all these connections back. Anytime you do any type of advertisement is, okay, how do I get people to do something? How do I get people to do this? And when I was talking with Trent, so Trent was at Automate with us. He was in our booth with Brian Privy, and they were showing off really awesome stuff. If you didn't get a chance to see them, I think there's some videos coming out here shortly. They're fantastic. But I was sitting there and marveling at like the stuff they had done in like the 2 months we had worked together. And, Trent was telling me all about this workshop he had coming up. And I was like, we're always doing this work to make the connections after the fact, to make sure someone can get the thing that they need to do the thing. I was like, but this group is already doing the thing we want them to do. So let's just give them stuff. Like, just make it easy.
It's crazy. I was in Prague last week speaking at Siemens Developer Days for WinCCOA. So I was in the software layer. This wasn't Edge stuff. But there was a guy, so I did 3 speeches. I did a keynote, and then I did 2 mastermind sessions, workshop sessions. One in the morning on day 2, one in the afternoon, and they were connected. The morning one was like theoretical. The one in the afternoon was application. It was an actual integration. And then I opened the floor to questions, right? And so many of the questions, this is to your point, so many of the questions are, I have this line card of stuff I have to sell. There were so many business development guys there. And I've got this line card. And my job is to sell this stuff on this line card, right? And so I have to, find potential buyers for anything on the line card. I have to qualify them. I have to have conversations with them. And then I have to try and sell them the stuff on my line card. And he said, how do I sell? And I said, you don't. Like, you don't sell. You solve problems. Like, this is one of the things Phoenix Contact understands. Okay, if anything I've had conversations with Ira about at length has been, Phoenix Contact starts with the customer problem and works their way back to the solution. And then they have a solution that hopefully includes a product that Phoenix Contact makes, right?
That's
what you do, solve the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Well, here's the thing that Trent's going to be doing. He's going to be solving a problem for hundreds of students, and the problem's going to apply to everybody in the room. You talked about print media, $10,000 for a print media run. I have a friend who has a master's in marketing. And I remember I asked her, when you do these flyer mailers, all this stuff, what is the conversion rate? And it's crazy. She's like, she goes, our average is 1%.
Yeah.
She goes, and that's good. Our number's good at 1%. She goes, our goal is 4%.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know what the conversion rate is when you start? You have a customer has a problem that you have a solution for. You start with the problem and you talk about the solution. You know what the conversion rate is there? It's over 70%. It's 7 out of 10. So to your point, it's like, it's amazing to me how companies, why is it Phoenix Contact understands it? And tell me why Phoenix Contact gets it, and so many other OEMs don't get that.
So I can't speak for other companies, but I can tell you that,
but you're an expert. You're an expert who observes.
I do.
Right. You know the competition.
It's hard. And I'll tell you why it's hard is because, when we launched PLCnext, I think 2018 is when we launched it. We launched it here in the US in 2019. It's an open control platform, and that's kind of what we went with as our marketing strategy. It, it does Linux, it's IIoT ready, it's revolutionary, big idea type stuff. And you set that out there and you just assume people are going to want to use your thing. Like, it's a great product. I wouldn't be sitting here talking about it if it wasn't a great product, because you tend not to spend a lot of money on great products. But it's like, we were caught in that same thing. Like, why aren't people, we have this thing, why aren't people using it? And then the more we talked about the problem, like, everybody has that problem. And if you went to talk to people, they had that problem. And so, like, the more you just talked about the problem, the easier it was to get people to see what was going on, because instead of going out and, the typical sales strategy of, here's my widget, buy my widget, it's better than the widget you have in there. If you go against a Siemens or a Rockwell and just say, here's my 2152, go replace your, control logics that you've had in here for 25 years, people are going to look at you sideways and go, why would I do that? And so then, you immediately get a barrier, you immediately get people to stop. But if you start talking about, hey, I want to be able to go in the unified namespace, or I want to be able to get stuff on the AWS. Early 2020, we were talking about just getting data to the cloud. It was like, people were like, what do you mean get data to the cloud? And it was like, right out of your controller. And they're like, that's not possible. And it's like, no, you can. Like, it doesn't have to be a huge barrier for you. And it as much as I can, I try to tell the team, work the problem, find the solution to their problem, And like you said, hopefully it's our stuff. I would love 100% of the time for it to be our stuff, but I want to fix a problem, and I want my team to fix the problem. And if the problem is they need to get something else in there that's not our stuff, then let's get a system integrator that can help them, because, you know, like a Trent Christopher or a Brian Privy, because ultimately I want them to fix their problem. I don't want to just go, you know what, you didn't want to buy our stuff, sorry, you know.
Hey, Vaughn, will you do me a favor? I know we've never done this before. Will you send Trent the link to this and have him join the podcast? Will you do that? Vaughn, will you send Trent the link and have him join the podcast and bring him in here? Because I want to ask him. I was going to ask him and he could put it in the chat, but I'd much rather him just say it. Like, why is it? Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. So Vaughn's going to send Trent Christopher the link, and we're going to have Trent join in here because I want to piggyback on this piece. Here's why I wanted to do this podcast. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the biggest, you know, we're in the fifth industrial revolution. Most people haven't accepted it yet, but we are. It started in 2022. The groundbreaking innovation, the technology that changed everything is large language models, ChatGPT. The follow-up to that, everybody's been working on digital fluency, prompt engineering. How do I use large language models to do more with less? And people have been trying to come up with ways to integrate with AI through APIs. And then Anthropic comes out with Model Context Protocol 18 months ago. Everyone starts using it 6 months ago. And like the whole market has shifted in 6 months. Okay. There's a problem. There's an amazing stuff going on with MCP, and you must know what MCP is. And we're going to do a workshop on it next month. But here's the risk. And here's why we are doing edge connectivity this month. And then we said, let's do MCP next month. Digital transformation. Gangs, those of you who are listening here, this is really, really important. Digital transformation is about collectively increasing the collective knowledge of an organization through data. It's about making a business smarter. The third industrial revolution was about automating processes. That's what PLCs do. That's what devices do. It is unfair. Here's one of the issues I got with the PLCnext. It's not really a PLC. Okay. It's a PLC. It does the stuff a PLC does, but it's not even PLC plus. It is an edge compute device that has inside of the Venn diagram. If you take a PLC as a Venn diagram, IO, logic, alarming, that entire PLC Venn diagram sits inside of the PLCnext in a much larger circle that has edge compute, okay, processing, data contextualization, data operations, connectivity, okay? The PLCnext is really an edge compute device that encapsulates a PLC inside of it. That's what it really is. Mm-hmm. And if we talk about PLC 1969 PLC versus PLCnext PLC in 2018, they are not the same thing. They're not even remotely the same thing. The only thing where they overlap is automation. Mm-hmm. And then it's all this other stuff, right? Here's the risk, okay? Digital transformation is about collectively increasing the collective knowledge of an organization. And that's by converting data into information you can act on. You want to do that digitally so you can monitor it in real time. Anyone can monitor it, whatever it is, in real time. If you monitor state of your business in real time, that means you can store the state as history. And if you can store the state as history, normalize and contextualize, including, most importantly, the stuff that comes from your machines, okay? If you can do that, then you can train models to learn from that state, okay? Then you can inference on current state. You can learn from the history, and you can inference on now. And if you inference on now, you learned from the past, you can predict the future. But guess what you must do in order to do that? You must connect, you must collect, you must store, you must analyze. You have to do that piece. That's the edge connectivity component of digital transformation. The real risk is with Model Context Protocol, organizations are going to try and short circuit the first half. Mm-hmm. They're going to try and jump to the place they're not ready yet. And they're not going to get the value out of it that they expect because they didn't crawl before they stood. And the reason we are doing this edge connectivity is we need to demonstrate to the market, you can't skip this step. Mm-hmm. Like, Trent Christopher and Brian Pybee and Dustin Symes and me and Zach and anybody who's worked on the edge in their career is going to tell you, you cannot skip that step if you want to get the most out of Industry 4. And so that's why we're doing this workshop.
Yeah.
Right. I want to go ahead with that. And then I want to ask you a question behind that.
No worries. I was just going to say that I draw a line, but we have apprentices come through straight out of college. We try to teach them as much as we can before they go out in the field. And I've been saying this for years, but I'm a big South Park fan. At least I was, and one of my favorite episodes they ever did was Underpants Gnomes. You haven't seen it. It's a wild episode. Essentially, gnomes steal the underpants from the children. They follow them back to where the children are, or the gnomes are, and they're like, why are you stealing our underpants? And the answer is, oh, it's part of our business plan. And the business plan is step 1, steal underpants. Step 2, ? Step 3, profit. And no one can ever give them what step 2. And to me, that's digital maturity. Like You just explained that in, a minute and a half. Everybody clip what you just said. But that is like every time we would go out with PLCnext, people would be like, oh, I can get it on the cloud. Okay, I want every tag that's on this controller in the cloud right now. And then you go, well, that's going to be like $30,000 a month of like AWS fees just before you do anything. And they're like,
right,
I don't want it. I don't want it anymore. You told me I could save money, or I'm spending money. And it's like, it's trial and error, a lot of trial and error of having the conversation and now trying to gauge where people are on that digital maturity. Because if they're at the beginning, you have a lot of teaching to do before you sell.
They don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
Right. And we have this technology S curve. We have a new, Trent, the links have been sent to your email and Discord, brother. We have this new, it's a mastermind mini course. It's a 6-video, 2-hour course that's like an introduction to Mastermind, the Mastermind program. And I shot the first video today, which was what is digital transformation? And in order to do that, I had to talk about all the industrial revolutions, and I have to talk about what happens between industrial revolutions. And there's some groundbreaking technological innovation. And you have people you have the Teslas and the Amazons of the world who started after the 4th Industrial Revolution, right? So after TCP/IP won the protocol wars. So Jeff Bezos in 2002, 4 years after Industry 4 started, okay? 4 years, Jeff Bezos was the first CEO to send an email out to all employees saying, we are not going to share data manually anymore. You're going to build services for everything. You're not going to send anything in email. You're not going to send it in spreadsheets. We're going to build services for every transmission of data and information in the business. Okay. That didn't happen at General Motors. General Motors in the United States mastered the art of Industry 3, albeit they did it late, but they still mastered it. They mastered automation. Ford did not master automation the way General Motors did. Was it General Motors who said in 2002, hey, we're going to make the transmission of data as easy as possible for us? No. Why? What they said is, no, transmission of data is dangerous. Purdue's security model tells me what they learned during Industry 3 is transmitting data is dangerous. People could steal it. Mm-hmm. Well, the problem is what they learned during Industry 3 wasn't true anymore, because when MQTT was invented in 1998, 1999, the first edge-driven protocol, that is, the client publishes into an infrastructure, therefore no firewalls need to be open. The people who started in Industry 4 didn't have this preconceived notion that the transmission of data is dangerous. And so when you're talking to a legacy business, you have to unteach what they learned during serial networks, right? And by the way, there's all these people out there who talk about, like, is a PLCnext PLC inherently secure? You bet your fucking ass it is. It is more secure than a ControlLogix PLC from Rockwell. And we could compare this. We could actually put them side by side, and I could show you the intrusion points on both. Okay. It is much more secure. Why? Because it primarily supports edge-driven protocols. In fact, edge-driven protocols are the default. So the default isn't to open a port to communicate to a PLCnext. The default is to have the PLCnext report out to a thing it is certified to talk to. Mm-hmm. But what is the argument? What are the primary objections to sharing data from a PLC to the cloud? What is the number one objection? Not before cost. Cost is number two. What's the number one objection?
IT is going to come down on me.
Right. I'm not exposing my
yeah.
PLC to the fucking internet. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You're not exposing it. Exposing it is punching a hole in. Okay. That's exposing it, because anybody can hit that hole. You have some permission on which request you should approve. When it's edge driven, there is no hole. You're pushing out. You're publishing out from the PLC to a certified connection. Okay. All right. I want to ask you a question here to follow up on this piece. What is it you are seeing in the market? Like, obviously what you see in the market lags behind what the bleeding edge innovators are doing, right? It's always the OEM who builds the hardware is always frustrated at how little of the hardware the customer is using, right? You're always like, wait a minute, there's all these tools and you're not using any of them. Okay. But so with that framework, what is it you're seeing? Like, obviously, PLCnext has seen this big growth. You guys have grown steady since 2018. By the way, I see them everywhere when I go out in the market. I mean, I see them, I see them everywhere. And, but what is it you're seeing? Like, what are the problems that people are primarily using a PLCnext to solve?
Yeah, so where we've been very successful is and actually it was funny at Automate. I had the Rockwell, who's the head of engineering, was there, and I was showing him, literally we were tagging on to a Rockwell network to just get data out. And what you have is the industry 3, organizations that are big. And we learn a lot because we actually build a lot of stuff here in Harrisburg. And so we're doing this to our own machines. So we learned a lot by doing it ourselves. Is how do I get the data out, right? In a way that doesn't disrupt the working heart, right? So it's a beating heart platform. Nobody wants to disrupt anything. It's been working for 15, 20 years. I don't want to do it. Like, everybody is so afraid right now to inject anything into the working system. They think everything has to be greenfield. Everything has to be new build, new production, new everything. And getting past that mindset of everything has to be new is one of the hardest steps that because you start talking about, edge-driven connectivity, unified namespace. Everybody's like, no, you're talking something else. I just want to talk Ethernet IP, or I just want to talk Profinet, right? And that first step of like, no, you don't have to redo your entire system. You can just put an edge device on here and it'll take the data that you have, and then you can figure out what you want to do with it. That part is like, it blows people's minds because they're like, it can't be this easy. Like, it can't be easy just to put a hardware device on my network and it'll work. And it's like, that's what you're doing. That's what you're asking to do, first of all, and you can do that.
Well, guess what the easiest part of Connect, Collect, Store, Analyze, Visualize, Find Patterns, Report, and Solve is? It is the Connect, Collect, Store. That is not that it's anybody. It is the easiest component part. Why? You do this. So you're in Harrisburg, PA. That's where you are?
Yeah.
All right. So those of you, here, Harrisburg, PA has got some, like, TE Connectivity's got an enormous facility outside of Harrisburg. Outside of there, so the connectivity industry and machining is a big one. CNC shops all over the place, Harrisburg. So that's what you're looking at in that area. By the way, some of the most bleeding edge companies in the world are actually, most people don't know this, but it's one of the reasons I hate flying in and out of the Harrisburg airport, because I've done a lot of traveling there. But and most people, I don't think of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania as like a bastion of technology, but or manufacturing, but it really is. It is. Industry and manufacturing is the centerpiece of that economy there. Okay. Here is something that I find incredibly interesting. Go to a legacy manufacturer, like the types of manufacturers you'll see in Harrisburg, right? Not a lot of there's greenfield, but greenfield's not the rule, it's the exception. There's lots of legacy brownfield. You take an architect like me, you take a Trent Christopher, you take you take a Amy Williams, you take a Brian Private, you take Zach, you take Michael Walker, Matt Olson, you take an industry 4 architect and you do a Gemba walk on the plant floor with any manufacturer. And all you do is you say to yourself, I'm just going to point out all the smart devices here. That's all I'm going to do. I'm going to ask questions about that reveal. What is a smart device? A smart device is a thing that can connect to a network and it can inform about itself. Okay, so a PLC is a smart device. An HMI is a smart device. Edge PC is a smart device. An embedded controller, smart device. All right. All you're going to do is walk the plant floor and point out all the smart devices. And it is always stunning to me how blind the legacy manufacturer is to all the intelligence they already have in their plant and how little they're using it. Mm-hmm. So we call it dark data, like unlocking the potential in the data in the plant. We call it dark data. Dark data is all of this value, these valuable transitions, all these valuable events that you know nothing about. And you're not converting at all. And I'm going to make an argument for the conversion of it. I talk about Tesla all the time, right? Obviously, I talk about Tesla. Why? Well, Tesla, lets us talk about them. Most clients are not going to let you publicly talk about how they're using data for commodity. Okay, Tesla is a data company. They're not a car company. We've had this conversation before, but I'm going to say something I don't normally say. So Tesla uses the car as a sensor. Okay, so the car is the world's most expensive sensor, and it is collecting all sorts of data. It's collecting data in order to convert that data into full self-driving. It is collecting driver behavior, and the behavior of drivers around it, so that Tesla has an insurance business where it does car insurance for people. You can sign up for Tesla insurance. Your premium will adjust month to month based on how safe of a driver you are and how safe of the drivers are around you. And their underwriting is more accurate and more competitive than someone who is using actuaries to look at actuary tables. That's a data business, okay? Tesla is selling traffic information for traffic studies. That's a data business. Robotaxi is a data business. Tesla is a data company. And get what? One of the requirements of Tesla is we collect every transition. We collect every event. Every single event. You would be hard pressed to walk a Tesla facility and try to find dark data. But you can walk in any legacy plant and I can point out thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of individual data points that they are completely blind to. And that data, what is ML, machine learning and artificial intelligence? It's about finding patterns in data we can't see with the naked eye. Okay. And then that's how they do the magic of Amazon's magic, is predicting what you buy 6 weeks before you buy it. Well, how do they do that? They find patterns in the data we can't see with the naked eye. That they find patterns Walmart can't find. They find patterns Target can't find. Okay. It's amazing to me the number of Industry 3 manufacturers who in 2025 aren't jumping at the acquisition and conversion of this data into information. So let me ask you this, Zach. How are you overcoming that? Obviously, one way is to sponsor this workshop, and all these people are going to get educated at the same time. But as a general practice, how is Phoenix Contact doing that? Because if you look at your numbers, your growth is steady. Mm-hmm. Growth is not steady in all your competitors.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's education, right? And it's education, understanding not just if we're going to go talk about this and be makers in Industry 5.0, like we have to know about it more than the customer does, because there's going to be more questions. And like having a conversation, I try to say it this way, like when we got our first fax machine at my house, because my dad was a salesman when I was growing up in the 90s, we got a fax machine. My friends, we sent so many faxes to like just random numbers that we knew had fax machines. We couldn't believe the technology, right? We couldn't believe, well, our minds didn't understand that paper could get from one place to another. And I might be dating myself, but that's okay. Like and the fax machine in my dad's house was like a toy for us, but we learned so much on that fax machine. I learned how to send things in, to my school. Like I started sending homework in. One of my teachers had a fax machine. I started faxing him my homework, and like no one could understand how I was getting things. I was never turning in work. and they were like, what's going on? And so in my mind, if I go out and I talk to a customer and they're sitting there, and when everybody says industry 3, they think it's these giant manufacturers. There are giant manufacturers.
Yes.
The majority of the US industry is small, tiny OEM. They build a saw. They've been building it for
95%.
40, 100 years. They've been doing the same thing. They might have upgraded a few times. And I always try to tell the customer, follow the money, right? And there's a reason why Meta and AWS are spending so much money building data warehouses, building all these data centers. It's because that's where the money is. And it's like, and you just tell them, like, do you know, if you collected on this machine and then used software as a service, repairs as a service, any AAS as you want, you could like double, triple, quadruple your income without making one more product. Like the stuff that goes out the door is exactly the same. You just now quadrupled what you got because all the stuff that's coming in.
Well, what's the future? What's the future of manufacturing? The future of manufacturing. You want to know the fastest growing segment of manufacturing in the West? It's contract manufacturing. It is contracting the best manufacturer, not the best manufacturer of X or N or Y. It is contracting the best manufacturer. It is the fastest growing segment of manufacturing in the West. And what is the future? You to your point, 95% of all manufacturers fall into this category. 1 site or 2 sites, 1 or 2 sites, $25 million in revenue or less, 200 employees or less. That is 95% of all manufacturers. If you want to see like the classic manufacturer, go to New Hampshire. There's a company called New Hampshire Industries. They've been making, go ahead and pull Ira's comment back up here in a second. They have been making pulleys for like lawnmowers for 100 years. Pulleys. Okay. New Hampshire's Industries. They've been making pulleys for 100 years. Okay. Their entire facility is just, how do you make a pulley that somebody who's going to build a lawnmower is going to use?
Mm-hmm.
That's literally all they do. And they've been doing it for 100 years. And they only recently endeavored into new technology. They got into manufacturing the rolls that go on conveyor systems. Anybody who's worked in conveyance knows there are basically these big steel rollers that go underneath the conveyor belt. They've just gotten into that stuff. You want to know your mom and pop bread and butter, 95% of manufacturers out there, it's companies like New Hampshire Industries. Okay. And when I did the Gemba walk there were people there who were new, who were like, oh my God, we're in the Stone Ages. But there were very few people in the organization who understood the potential. Very few. And that is the rule, not the exception.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so why are we doing this workshop? We're doing this workshop because I think the reason we have to do it is because too many of those people who don't know the potential of digital transformation are going to hear MCP, artificial intelligence, and they're going to try and short circuit. And they're not going to build the digital infrastructure. To your point, they're not going to make collecting their data and putting it somewhere to commoditize it a priority. Mm-hmm. They're going to try and hire someone to plug, an MCP server in. Okay. And that's dangerous. That's driving down. That's driving off a cliff. That is trying to run a 100-meter dash before you've ever stood up. Okay. Literally, that's what that is. Okay. That's why we're doing it. I think when you look at the marriage of, the PLCnext with this workshop, I'm incredibly grateful you guys are willing to do this, to give 50 away to people. It's an enormous commitment and it's a big deal. Now what it is like, it's easy for me to build a demo board. I can call people, hey man, can you send me and they're going to send me a unit because I'm the YouTube guy. Right. Yeah. But the fact is for every unit I get, there's 100 people out there who need their own unit to do their own testing. Right. And this is an opportunity for people to get that, to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, learn edge connectivity, but also get the unit they're going to use to do day 3. Not, Trent's going to show you on day 2 what the intermediate step is, connecting to legacy technology, and you can use a PLCnext to do that, because it doesn't just talk to IO, it talks to the old stuff that you got in your plan already, right? So, but long term, you're not going to use a PLCnext to talk to old shit. You're going to use the native technology that the PLCnext supports to be the PLC of the future in your facility. All right. With that, bring up what Ira said, and then yes, data with context becomes information regardless of industry. This information will drive the future of business. No question. If you are a manufacturer who is not learning how to sell manufacturing as your expertise and not the finished good that you pump out the door, that finished good is the means to an end. And the end is acquiring knowledge through the process of creating that finished good and then selling that knowledge. That is the future. It's not the future. It's the present. It's what Tesla's been doing. It's what Amazon does. It's what Volkswagen North America does. Let me ask you this question on MCP, because I wasn't going to ask this, but are you guys looking at supporting MCP on any of your devices? And is any of this in the works? I haven't talked to.
Yeah, I honestly, I can't answer that question because I'd have to ask the firmware and software team back in Germany. But I can tell you that they are giving it a good look. I can't tell you where it is in the development process, but I know it is being looked at.
Are you playing with MCP yourself at all? Like,
I have not. No, I've so in my role, and this is maybe dropping a little bit of news coming here, is we're really gearing up for a virtual PLCnext, which is
sweet.
It is a Docker, I don't know what it's called. It's a containerized version of PLCnext, which essentially takes it off the hardware so that you can put it on whatever hardware you want, as long as it can run it a container. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Yeah. So
nice.
I mean, that launch will be coming here globally in the next few months. But
so like, would you map IO? So obviously, if you're going to containerize it, then you don't know the physical addressing space of the IO. So is mapping of the IO going to be an argument when you deploy the container? Is that you're going to pass those in as variables?
I'm not technical enough to know the answer to that question, but I can tell you that the way it should work is that the container will exist, and we prefer Linux for containerization, but whatever containerization platform you want, whether it's Docker or Podman, you can do it. And then this is where I say we get truly open. Is before PLCnext was the hardware openness solution. If you want to do, Codesys, you can do Codesys on it. If you want to do PLCnext, you can do it. If you want it to just be a data aggregator, you want it to be, whatever you want it to be, it can be whatever you want it to be. But it was in that hardware. You had to have the hardware, and you said it earlier. Like getting the hardware is the hardest part in some of these, and that's why I think an Arduino, a Raspberry Pi, like everybody loves these devices because they're low cost, low barrier to entry. You can just start working on them. And so like the argument for this is why not? Why not Raspberry Pi with a PLCnext?
The answer, your answer is exactly right. There's 1,000 reasons why. There are no reasons why not.
Yeah.
I want to ask Trepania's, will the 50 PLCs giveaway only for the people in the US? Here, let me give you the technical answer. You must have a US mailing address to get one of these PLCs. Okay. And it's just outside of the United States, companies outside of the United States, especially in the West, are under pretty strict restrictions in terms of export controls. Mm-hmm. So, if you ever try to, especially in Germany. So if you try to get a product from Germany, it's not easy. It's very, very hard. And it has to do with export controls. So to just be able to send, you can't just mail the PLC anywhere in the world. It's not the way it works. And they're restricted by export controls. So the rule here is you must have a US mailing address in order for you to receive the PLCnext. Okay. So
one thing I will say to that, Walker, is that we do have global subsidiaries, right? And if someone is very interested in getting hardware, you can contact me directly. I can facilitate that conversation through one of our subsidiaries, and we can have the conversation. But I physically can only send stuff within the United States. It's
correct.
And
right and Phoenix Contact is a global company. I do want to back up on this virtual PLC Next. I know we had no plans.
I did not
announce
plan.
it.
I see the comments rolling in,
but obviously, yes. So let's go ahead and have it. So the virtual PLC of PLCnext is massive. Brian Pryby, hardware and software completely decoupled from Phoenix Contact products. Use what you want to use. So let's talk about what the implications of a virtual PLC from PLCnext is. Okay. So the reality is that all PLCs today, and again, let me start by saying PLCnext is not really a PLC. It is PLC plus so much more. Okay. Is you have a backplane, you have a motherboard, you have a processor, you have firmware, and then you have programming software that runs on top of that firmware, right? That connects to the implications of the virtual PLC is that the firmware and the programming that will be encapsulated in something you could deploy on basically any piece of hardware. And the backplane, the processor, the physical components of a PLC wouldn't need to come from PLCnext.
That's correct.
But by the way, that's PLCnext being a digital company, right? That's decoupling the software of PLC from the hardware of PLC is the obvious next step. The obvious next step. Why is it most people don't do it? Right? I mean,
selling hardware is nice. I can tell you that it is very nice to sell hardware.
Yes, because the hardware is, if you understand how our business works, the hardware is it's the entry point into all the other revenue streams, right? And the margins are really good. I mean, it's not. I mean, they're not breaking even on the hardware. You know, the margins are really, really good. And so obviously, this shows foresight on Phoenix's part. You know, what hardware would it require? At least 2 cores. So for one is the real-time OS part. That's not going to be Zach. Zach won't.
I can tell you basics of it. I know that for Linux, so we recommend Ubuntu Pro because it has the real-time patch already on Ubuntu Pro, and there you just have to enable the patch to make that work. There is, you might be able to find it on the website already if you search virtual PLCnext, the tech specs of it, but there is a minimum requirement for it, and I believe it is 2 cores is the minimum requirement.
Just that, just dual core.
I think it's dual core, like 2 megs of RAM. It's not a lot. It's not a lot.
So is this going to be an LXC container? Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Okay,
that is the idea. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here because there's only certain things I can talk about with it.
Yeah,
but it should be available to quickly deploy. Let's say that. So.
Right. So basically, those of you who aren't like familiar with Linux, you know, you'll hear a lot of people. They'll talk about. I mean, Litmus does this, right? Litmus is an operating system. Litmus Edge is an operating system. Well, it's an operating system because it is deployed as an LXC container, a Linux container. So it basically is a container that runs in the operating system, you know, and so they don't have to write a whole new kernel. They don't have to, if the device supports Linux, then their container is going to support the device. It's that simple. Yeah.
And that's the idea behind it. And a lot of this is coming from, you know, we've done some partnerships with Festo and Yaskawa with PLCnext. And there is a desire from the small product OEM, small to medium size, right? Of, you know, I just look at like EU CRA is coming down the pike here in 2 years. And in the US, I mean, the US, it means whatever. But in Europe, it means you're not getting CE on your product unless you comply. And so like, if I'm a small manufacturer and I created a PLC or I created some type of device that needs to connect to a network and I don't have a way to get there, wouldn't it be nice to just put PLCnext on it? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, is this the virtual control? You're talking about virtual control? Is that
virtual PLCnext control. Yeah.
All right. So if you guys want to read about it, you can go to look up Phoenix Contact Virtual Control. And then this has got basically the ground. So when I mean, I know this wasn't our
Yeah, sorry.
it wasn't, but no. This is the big announcement. Obviously, this is the big. I mean, by the way, it's a big deal when it comes to edge connectivity, because now all I'm doing is my brain is just, I'm thinking about it, I'm like, holy shit, my entire lab, I could literally turn my entire lab, every device I have in the lab back there. So I have a huge server rack over there with just Linux devices running. I could literally make all of them virtual PLCs. And I still have the power of the operating system.
Yes.
Right. So
and the power of the microcontroller that you're putting it on. So you're not taking the entire device and locking it down. It's just one small spot of it.
Yeah. So what you're getting is I can still deploy Docker. I could still use Portainer with Docker to manage all my containers right alongside the LXC container, which is running my virtual PLCnext. Yeah. That's a big, for those who are not tending, or the 51st, what is the cost of acquiring the PLCnext starter kit? So real quick, you're not getting the PLCnext starter kit. You are getting the AFC 2252, which is the or the 2152, which is it's the PLC that's in the starter kit. The starter kit's has some IO on it, and it's got some dials on it, and it's got, you're getting the PLC that's in the starter kit. But to answer his question, the starter kit, what's the answer on that question?
So I only know US pricing. I can tell you that we've done a lot to normalize pricing across the globe. So for the starter kit itself, I think that's around $700-ish. And you would have to go to your local distributor to talk about it. But I think it's around $700, and that gets you, like you said, it's got a backplane, it's got some potentiometers on it, it's got some IO that you can put in it, and there's a pre-made PLCnext starter kit, a PLCnext program that you just download and put right onto it. So
what I do is, so if you guys want to know, like when I'm testing Industry 3, Industry 4 application, I'm doing both brownfield integration and greenfield, and I'm doing it in a lab environment. So I got my lab board back there. I've got a Slick on there. I have a ControlLogix on there. I have an S7 1200 from Siemens. I have 8 or 9 legacy devices. Then I have a Opto 22 Groove Epic, and then I have a PLCnext starter kit. Those are in 2 different price points. So the Opto 22 Groove Epic is that's your $10,000 range. That's your higher end, where I'm going to be doing like way more advanced control. I'm looking for segmented compute. I mean, they're in totally different. You have entry level, you have mid level, which PLCnext is like above entry and the most competitively priced at the mid level. And then you've got Opto 22 at the top, and you used to have Bedrock. And I use my PLCnext and the Opto 22 for basically everything. And I start with the PLCnext. And the reason why is the development environment there's a unique development environment that I can use, an IDE that I can use for the development before I pivot to writing, using Node-RED and a bunch of other stuff in. But if you look at like all the support that the 2152 has, like the MATLAB support, and I mean, it's pretty sick, like what you guys have running, for what you get. Like if you're going to spend $750 on anything, you're spending it on the PLCnext starter kit for sure. What you're getting at that price point is ridiculous. Can I ask you this? So what is it? Obviously, this is the obvious next step. I mean, think about it, dude. Like I could literally, my brain is just, I didn't know. I mean, I did not know. I found out like everybody else right now.
No, I didn't mean to drop it on you. And I apologize for dropping it on this, but I mean, that's the same way my brain went. And when Germany told me about it, I was probably like, I want to say it was August of last year. And I was like, do you know what this means? And I think they know what it meant, but at the same time, I was like, no, do you know what it actually means for like people that want to develop? Like if you want to develop something and you have a hardware system, or, you're limited by the fact that you're not a massive company, that's buying PLCs by the 10s or 20s or 100s, you can deploy it. You can deploy your project that you wanted somewhere. And then we had a conversation with, one of at Automate, And I'm sure, you guys can ping Trent about this. I mean, when I dropped it on him, he was like, "Whoa, that means like I could put it on another manufacturer's, platform, and as long as they support, as long as they support,
I mean, I'm probably not going to point out all of them that you could, but there's a lot of them. I mean, honestly, the manufacturers are now their gears are turning. They're like, wait a minute, we're a Linux operator.
If you
we're
support
Linux
a container, it should work. Is the way. And now I say that having zero knowledge of how the container actually works behind the scenes. But I mean, if it's
you may end up with you may end up with addressing conflicts. But if you have terminal access on the device, if you have terminal access on the device, and you have a way of recalling the image, so from a USB port or something, you're gonna be able to deploy it. But you may end up with like address collisions, but that'll come in testing.
Yeah, don't be in the plant while you're doing it for the first time, But that's.
But I mean, you think about I can't. This has become like the big announcement. We'll close it up here, but I want to talk about this piece here. I don't think Phoenix Contact understands how big of a deal that actually is. I don't. Here's why. You have N number of PLCnext PLCs out there, whatever that number is. And the number of installations you'll have of the virtual control center, assuming it is easy to get it and deploy it. That is, the barriers to getting it and putting it on a device is not high. That is, you're not trying to control the sales process all the way through. You're getting it in as many hands as humanly possible. You're talking about a 10x growth. So for every one physical PLC, you're going to have 10 installations of virtual control. So for it'll be 10 to 1. Like, that's growth you can't get. And then now the question is, how much of that do we monetize? Do we have to monetize every install, or is there some point where an install needs the requirement of monetization? Like I must pay for a license or do I have to have a license before I install? Because that's a barrier that'll certainly slow down growth. But
it's definitely a debate that's happening. I can tell you the debate is happening internally at the moment.
Let me say this. If you are at Phoenix Contact and you are a decision maker, there is only one decision here. I appreciate everything you guys are doing, but I'm telling you this right now. Send this to everybody at Phoenix Contact. Your job is to get this virtual PLC, virtual control, into as many hands of people as humanly possible. And you cannot control that. You have got to make it very easy for the people who need to test it and prove it out to get it in their hands and build solutions with it so that they can go, do you want this? That's what you want. You don't want to do value proposition up front. If you look, I mean, all this advisement I've been doing to these huge companies, how do we grow? Why is it, Siemens, why do we only have 8% market share? And why hasn't that changed in the last 10 years? And I'm like, that is so obvious. It's crazy. Like, you make it impossible for people to try your products. Like, someone's got to really, 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 really want your product in order to invest in the time to get it. Whereas all your competitors are making it, you're a moron to not download it and try it because it's so easy, Matt Paris, I assume if running control, you'll want to dedicate cores just for that and no other applications. Now we're going to get into the technical.
Yeah, I don't even know how to answer
the dual core. When he said the dual core part, the first thing I thought, Matt, by the way, was, okay, 2 cores for IPC and 2 cores for control, because you definitely want those to be separate. So 4 cores is what I'm going to care about, But
I guess maybe it is 4, but I know that there is a version of it that only requires it's one dedicated core for the runtime. So
yeah, Matt, but LXC does. So LXC does allow, so Linux containerization does allow you to segment the cores. So this is how Opto 22 does it. It's how, I mean, they're not the only one. This is how lots of OEMs do it. They're using arguments passed in when they create the Linux container to say which cores on the device go to which functions. So, but you're correct. Docker doesn't allow you to say use core 1 or Core 2 or, you know. All right, with that, I am jumping to a call with Aaron Semley right now, and we're going to be talking about the workshop next month on Model Context Protocol, which will be for the Mastermind students. You guys will see the announcement for that coming out. Let me start by saying, Zach, Ira, a huge thank you to you guys for reaching out and sponsoring the Edge Connectivity Workshop, which is taking place this month, June 17, 18, and 19. You can go to iot.university, Edge Connectivity, and UNS. Look that up. I think there's a banner right at the very top. Trent Christopher is teaching that. There's still, I think we've got maybe 12 PLCs left. So it's the first 50 who have a U.S. mailing address, who are signing up a la carte, are going to get the PLC. I think there's a dozen left. So I think we've earmarked 38 of them or something so far. So so there are PLCs that are available. Zach, Ira, huge thank you to you guys for sponsoring the workshop. If there's anything we can do to promote virtual control, I would love to hear it, because I mean, I'd love to be able to put it on a device and play with it as soon as humanly possible.
As soon as I can get you one, I will get you one, Walker. Don't worry. And thank you guys. I just want to thank you. You know, we kind of went around this. Why are we doing this? Being a part of this community is great. And the effort this community is doing to push forward into Industry 5.0 and like make the future now is just fantastic. And that's really the reason we've done this, is we want more people to be engaged in this conversation.
Awesome. Perfect. And Matt Paris, I just want to jump on what Matt said.
Yeah.
Is anyone else having better luck isolating physical computer resources using hypervisors rather than container engines? Absolutely. Hypervisor is way easier to do the isolation. The problem is that now we're in virtualized hardware as opposed to virtualized application environments. But yes, no question, it is much easier at the hypervisor level. All right, with that, guys, thank you, Zach, Ira, Phoenix Contact, PLCnext, Trent Christopher, and the Edge Connectivity Workshop here in a couple of weeks. Like, subscribe, comment down below, and we'll see you guys in the next one.